What is up? Today's episode is going to be a little different, and intentionally so. This is one of those topics that really doesn't fit neatly into a quick fix or surface level explanation. Honestly, what really does fit into some quick fix or surface level explanation of this show, but we are going to be diving into the complexity of shame, the emotion of shame, how it shows up, how it hides, how it can attach to nearly anything and everything that we experience, and how it can also keep us stuck in those debilitating patterns of self-sabotage or simply being disconnected from who we really are. So what you are about to listen to is actually a piece of an audio that I originally recorded as a protocol follow-up for a client after a root cause therapy session. And as I was diving into just what I was going to be recording for her and what we were going to be really talking about in this after session summary in the protocol, I realized how important this conversation is for everyone on a healing journey, just to have knowledge of different emotions and how they can get stuck within our bodies. And I just felt called to share it here with you in this informal but very deeply intentional space. So in this recording, I also walk through Dr. David Hawkins Scale of Consciousness. I know that I've talked about this on the show before. So if you're unfamiliar, I do another quick deep dive into Dr. David Hawkins Scale of Consciousness here to help make a little more sense of why certain emotions may feel heavy and why we might keep repeating the same patterns and how we might get stuck in these different patterns of feeling these neutrally saying, quote unquote, negative emotions of possibly guilt or shame or anger or frustration or sadness, and how we also innately want to be feeling the feelings of love and peace and joy and acceptance and reason and peace. And then I'll be talking about shame's sneaky role in all of this, the invisible limits that it can place on how we fully allow ourselves to be ourselves and to live, love, and be seen as our authentic selves. So as you listen, I invite you to notice what resonates, what stirs something within you, and possibly even what brings you discomfort, because often that's where true work begins. So let's drop into the heart of this episode. Here is the original recording I felt called to share. Let's take a deep breath and receive what resonates. Hey beautiful, welcome to Naturally Empowered Living, your safe space to guiding you on your unapologetic self-awakening journey. This is your weekly sanctuary for waking up from autopilot and transforming the way you approach life through the power of meditation, energetics, and root cause therapy. It is my mission to help you heal unprocessed emotions and release stuck energies by alchemizing your struggle cycles into opportunities for deep self-love, awareness, trust, and connection, to return to your innate essence of being, stepping back into your energy of alignment. Because here, we honor all parts of ourselves, the messy and the magic, the shadows and the light, embodying all parts that make you, you. So if you are ready to get to the root of cultivating real change, get cozy, grab your journal and maybe favorite crystals, and let's discover our power within together. Hello. So I was creating a protocol to send to someone after a root cause therapy session that we just had. And the information that I was gathering, and I was just I kept going and I was like, this is so good. This is so good. I want to offer this knowledge and make this awareness available for everyone in a very informal, because I have one computer and I'm going to be going through my notes. I'm going to be sharing my screen. I might be pausing to switch my screens around, make sure that we're all good. And I mean, the lawnmower is going in the background, our neighbors, and all the things. Very informal video. However, I want to give this in a very impactful way. I would love to know what resonates with you, what lands well for you, and possibly what brings resistance or tension that you feel inside your body. So we were talking about the complexity of shame, the emotion of shame. However, before we get into that, I want to share my screen and talk a little bit about the scale of consciousness. So let me get this. I hope that this is working. This is Dr. David Hawkins' Scale of Consciousness. And what this shows you is all of our emotions that we feel. So, you see the lower emotions like the shame, the grief, the guilt, the fear, up to higher emotions on the scale closer to the top of the page are joy and love and acceptance, peace. Along with, on the left-hand side, you'll see the vibrational frequencies of these emotions. So we are all an energy of vibration. The universe, down to the trees, nature, ourselves, myself, the shirt I'm wearing, the seat I'm on, down to our emotions. We all have an energy and a vibration as well. So the lower emotions on this scale tend to be heavier, and the higher emotions on the scale are lighter. And as human beings, every single one of us is trying to feel these higher vibrational states, those feelings of love, of peace, of joy, of acceptance, of connectedness. And we're all going about it in our own ways because we're all on different paths. We all have different experiences. We all go through different events. And heaven forbid, we have the same event. It comes back to our each unique individuality, our each unique makeup, our nervous systems might respond to the same event that someone else has had in a different way. So what happens is we also go through life, we start accumulating these lower, heavier emotions also. We start accumulating guilt and shame and fear and anger and sadness. And what happens is when we hold on to these emotions, we're not able to process them in the moments. We are suppressing them. We are repressing them, maybe subconsciously, possibly projecting them off, turning into a trigger, and then we project them later at someone else or at ourselves, or we are just responding in a way from that triggered emotional response within our body because we weren't able to process, allow that emotion to move through us completely. And we start to feel dragged down to the bottom of this scale because our emotions are always a feedback mechanism and they could get stuck if they aren't able to fully go through. So when we don't feel into these and when we aren't able to process them in the moments, we start to get heavier and heavier to the point of where some days it's hard to get out of bed. We fall into feelings of depression. We fall into anxiety. We have these recurring patterns within our life. And when we get down to the bottom of the scale with these compounded feelings of being stuck inside of us, feeling these heavier emotions, it gets harder to feel those higher states. Also, it gets harder to feel the love, the peace, the joy, the acceptance. And what happens? A possible coping mechanism might come along, or a self-sabotaging cycle, a protective mechanism created within ourselves to protect us from said event or that trauma or that emotion from coming out because we feel that we have to protect ourselves. So these coping mechanisms can take so many different forms. A lot of people think of addiction as drugs and alcohol alone. However, there's gambling and sex and food and shopping and the internet and work and self-talk and perfectionism, being stuck in that survival mode state of fight, flight, freeze, or fall, and like the list goes on. So whatever coping mechanism that we choose, we can temporarily cover up those feelings of shame or guilt or fear. We numb it out for a little while and we get to taste these higher states of love or joy or acceptance. So we find this coping mechanism that works for us acutely to block, continue to suppress these emotions. And all of a sudden, we feel the courage, the happiness, and we're like, oh my gosh, I remember when I used to feel like this. Like it's been years since I felt this way. And we continue to pull. This is how an addictive habitual cycle pattern starts, or self-sabotaging patterns cycles start. And this is why people continue to keep going back to that vice or keep going back to that nervous system state. So whenever we stop that vice or allow that emotion to come up, we feel those hard feelings. We're feeling those feelings of guilt or shame because we haven't addressed them. We haven't allowed them to fully process. We've just covered them up and we've numbed them out for a short period of time. So we get stuck in this yo-yo loop-like cycle, going back to the behavior. Maybe we're a little conscious willpower is like, we got to stop this, but by golly, it makes me feel good. It makes me feel emotionally at peace. It makes me feel like blurring the edges. I feel calm for once. So we get stuck in this loop-like cycle. And the key here to breaking this cycle is to go back and find out what we're holding on to, what emotion that is, what unprocessed, suppressed emotion from the past. What is that root? To be able to release it, to process it, to move up that scale of consciousness and feel those feelings of happiness and peace and love naturally. We start to naturally raise our baseline. So now coming back to shame specifically for the sole purpose of this conversation, feeling ashamed, if you remember that on that scale, it is, as a whole being, it's the heaviest emotional and physical energy. It was the last emotion on the scale. And this emotion can cause people to want to hide away and contract. And like that's where a lot of the feelings of depression or suicidal thoughts can come up. It is very different than all the other emotions in the sense of it is all encompassing. Like we feel ashamed as a whole person. That's where feelings of not of feeling worthless or feeling like a failure can come in because shame inhibits our self-expression for us to feel safe. So if we're feeling anger or embarrassment or guilt, going a little higher up on that scale, shame is what we use to fragment them off, and it keeps even those emotions repressed. So the thing with shame is that it can attach to other emotions and behaviors and experiences and patterns as well. So shame is like the one emotion that really like gums up our healing journey because it can attach to everything because shame still wants to keep you safe. However, it's making you withdraw. It's making you inhibit. It's making you stay back. And a big part of our healing journey is to step in, is to step forward, is to engage and honor and work towards. I don't know what that noise was. That was really loud. um, to work towards welcoming all parts of ourselves. So this shame is hiding those parts of ourselves, even possible shame itself, feeling ashamed. The shame is hiding you feeling ashamed. So getting, a little traction with the shame, it could really help open up your world in such a beautiful way because suddenly you have access to a little bit more of these parts of yourselves, these other emotions behind the emotions, your desires, your expressions of your authenticity, they start to come up to the surface a little more to either live in a more expressive, authentic way or possibly to be inquired and examined without judgments through a modality, a healing modality, possibly root cause therapy, working with a practitioner yourself. So shame is more often than not turned into a whole identity. Like I said, it's like an all encompassing because it gets so interwoven with everything else, going on. Your emotions, your stories, your narratives, they have this overarching theme that there's just something wrong with me. So I do want to note here that there is healthy shame versus toxic shame. So just like all emotions, right? Every single emotion coming from a neutral space, they are all here for a purpose. So in terms of a healthy version of shame, it could be, going way back to the caveman survival days and, you have your tribe and there might be a possible threat in the woods or you hear rustling of branches and, everyone's like, be quiet, there's a threat over here and you're off dancing and frolicking and making all these noises, right? You're probably going to get glares. You're probably going to be reprimanded. There's like this possible like wave of shame that covers over you. Maybe you're embarrassed in the moment and you retract and you come back in a little bit. However, this is for the overall safety of everyone involved. So after said threat would leave, hopefully you'd have a conversation with said tribal member or someone to say like explaining to you the specific context of why that action was not necessarily right or not necessarily the best choice within that situation, right? So saying something consoling, being compassionate, we don't want you to shut down your expressions in the future. However, we are a beautiful expression, expressive people as humans to begin with, but keeping it in the context of healthy and safe ways of experiencing said, feelings, expressions, things like that. So there is a way of having healthy expressions of emotions to learn how to be a human, right? To learn how to survive. However, it gets kind of tricky sometimes because shame can also become toxic in the form of, again, that overarching identity, making it a form of identity. So, using the same scenario, how this shame could possibly become toxic if it wasn't processed through, if that conversation wasn't had after to say, like, hey, your expression as a human is valid. However, in said situation, like we needed to be safe here if we want to survive. So we had to, be quiet in that situation. However, how this can become toxic is, when I was dancing around and everyone's telling me to be quiet and there's a threat around the corner, I didn't have that conversation afterwards. I wasn't able to process it. I turn inside myself and I say, not only that that action was wrong, however, I am wrong as a human being. There is something wrong with me. I am not normal. And from that day forward, that becomes your inner narrative, compounded then with future experiences, future events, reinforcing that it's not safe to express. And you want to isolate and you have extremely low opinions about yourself. And you begin to form this harsh inner critic versus, yes, maybe that action wasn't the best choice to make. You're making it all encompassing. Does that make sense? So healthy shame is letting us know that we have limits as a human, okay? If we have no shame, we can quickly like head towards the narcissistic behaviors, which is a completely other conversation. But as we go into toxic shame, we have these healthy limits of shame that we as humans need, but they become massive, right? They put every limitation that we have on humans as a whole onto only ourselves, to the point where we narrow down every perimeter. It becomes, I don't deserve this. This isn't for someone like you. Let it be your relationships, your business, your success, your happiness, your joy. It becomes a form of self-sabotage, and shame takes the wheel of that bus. So let's talk a little bit about self-sabotaging. Kind of coming back to present time, I feel that a lot of people that I personally work with have a lot of these self-sabotaging patterns, have a lot of these habitual inner self-critic, harsh self-talk. Maybe they struggle with anxiety or a little bit of ADHD, or I am working with some people that have gone through abuse, and we have this inner critics. We have these inner voices. So self-sabotage. How much of myself can I be? This is an invisible limit that we give ourselves because we feel unsafe to go beyond said limit that we give ourselves, because we might put ourselves into that position of shame where your shame is triggered because someone sees you, and that feels unsafe. That fear of being seen, or whatever that trigger was for you to begin with. So shame typically works in this loop and an accumulation. So there's typically isn't a one-time event that, roots the shame within the body. Typically one event won't root shame within your body. However, it has this pattern, this accumulation that loops around itself. So shame works as a loop within your body once it's stored there. So you might have this self-sabotaging pattern within yourself, and you might be withdrawing or isolating yourself because you have low self-worth. However, it's affirming itself because now you have your inner critic coming back to say, see, I have no friends, which reinforces that loop of shame. Or another example, thinking of perfectionism, how that could possibly be rooted in shame. We know no one is perfect, but if you're running from this shame, you're trying to outrun it by being perfect. Again, going back to everyone has different triggers, everyone has different roots, and what's the word I'm looking for? Different events isn't the right word, but everyone has different ideas or events that have happened where the shame is rooted from. That word isn't coming back to me. So we're running from this shame by striving to be perfect. But then you might get passive aggressive or defensive when you make a mistake. Or maybe you're looking for moments of imperfection within yourself, which then reinforces your belief of not being good enough. Okay? So the lack of connection, or like the gap here, is when shame is living in the body. However, we're only allowing our actual thoughts to create those identities around ourselves. We're giving ourselves the opportunity to solely live in our heads. I'm a failure. I am worthless. I'm not good enough. Rather than also allowing ourselves to get into our body to identify where that root of shame is. So our thoughts become dominating, and we become overwhelmed, and these narratives and these stories continue to give ourselves the ever never-ending cycle of that inner critic, right? And it's in making the connection of where it's residing and rooted and attached within your body, because a lot of times, as I just shared a couple minutes ago, this toxic shame is running amok, and we're not having the awareness that we need to process it, and we're not having the skills and the resources and the capacity to be able to meet it within our body to then stop that cycle, to, quiet that inner critic, or possibly to show love and acceptance to all parts of ourselves. Like that is, everything is rooted back to love and acceptance to become whole. So I want to kind of close out here with giving an example of possibly how a imprint, that's the word I was looking for, how an imprint can get rooted within your body. Okay. So I'm calling this a traumatic imprint. However, the example I'm going to say, you might not be like, that wasn't very traumatic. Again, this is coming from a neutral standpoint, because when we're talking about the root causes of shame or any heavy emotion, it's going to come back to whatever undigested life experience that we were not able to process in those moments of unfolding. Or I do want to preface that there's always time for repair. So once we are able to process those emotions or digest those life experiences, they will be processed and dissolved and alchemized. Okay. So I'm not saying like, oh my gosh, like we're doomed. This is the work that I do. This is the work that I help you do, is to be able to process those emotions. So one thing to note, and this is, I kind of dabbled a little bit into saying this, is that trauma is very subjective. Okay. So what is held as an imprint for one person may or may not be an imprint for another person. Okay. It's very subjective. It's not objective. And of course, there's extreme circumstances. And again, I'm not here to argue what trauma is and what trauma is not, because there are extreme circumstances like sexual abuse or physical abuse to where it will be traumatic and make an imprint for probably pretty much anyone having that experience. Okay. But there are other events and things on this spectrum. And this is the example that I kind of want to dive into. So what can happen in a moment of trauma, or what happens for an imprint to actually get rooted within your body and stuck there is, let's give this example here. You could probably relate to this in some capacity within your life of growing up. Or I'll use me as an example. I'm in school. I'm in one of my classes, and this imprint can be not intended to be harmful or not intended to be offensive by anyone. I'm just a kid in school and I'm in class and I want to put my hand up to answer a question. I don't normally do that, but in this context, I'm very confident. I know this, I think I know this answer, and I put my hand up to answer the question, and whatever I say it's wrong. And everyone starts laughing. I don't know what I've done. I start to look around, everyone's laughing or pointing or snickers, and, everyone in the room is just looking at me, and I just feel so consumed. And what do you want to do? You want to just like curl up in a ball. I feel so consumed by this embarrassment, and it comes over my system, washes over my system. And in that moment, my body enters a stress response. Any moment of our life where the nervous system deceives some sort of threat or stressful, response environment, that could be a physical or psychological threat, we will go into a state of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And whichever class that the nervous system deems as best for your survival in that moment, it will enter into. So I'll probably go into a state of freeze in that moment. And I'm automatically, like as a human being, I'm looking around for connection. I'm looking around my environment, maybe at some sort of resource or another human being that just is attuned to that moment, to me in that moment. I might look towards a friend, but, wanting to connect eyes with them, wanting to connect with them. And maybe they're the ones like laughing the hardest because they're thinking nothing of it. Like, oh my gosh, that was so silly. Maybe I'll look at my teacher and they turned their back for that moment that I looked at them, and I'm not getting connection there or anywhere else. So what I do in that moment is I open up a loop. I open up this trauma loop inside my body, inside my system. And in order to complete that loop, it has to be closed. It has to be processed. And we're typically not taught how to do this when we're young, let alone, in adulthood now. So in that instance, if I leave that classroom, nobody was there that I could speak to at school, no attuned person to help, console me, talk me through this, help me process what happened. And then I go home that night. I go home, my home environment, that's not a place either where I could properly process. I don't have that attuned parent. This is not my personal life right now. I don't have this attuned parent that I could talk to, hug with, feel safe. And I can't connect with anyone and I just feel stuck. I feel alone. I can't process this embarrassment. I can't process this fear. That's just cycling through. So what happens is this loop remains open. When this loop remains open, the overwhelmed nervous system, that emotional energy that doesn't have anywhere to go, it can't fully process and move through our body, it gets stored. And as a result of that, we can create painful narratives moving forward about ourselves in the world. And the beliefs are very generalizing. This is a difference between our conscious thoughts, our conscious willpower, and our subconscious. It's very generalizing. So they generalize everything. In that instance, I can decide about myself based on that shame, which was embarrassment in the moment. It's not safe for me to speak up. Not more specifically, it's not safe for me to speak up in this certain situation or in this certain context, but generally, it's not safe for me to speak up. And when that belief is then held onto and still not addressed, we create what's called an orphaned part of ourselves, a shadow part of ourselves. And this could be looking from that day forward, anything potentially similar happening within our life. Now our nervous system is triggered to that response to protect ourselves. We have created a protector part ourselves. So when people say like time heals all wounds, when it comes to trauma, just think about it. Fast forward 20 years from that day and something happens to me in a relationship, or I need to, express something in a relationship and I need to express my needs, and I go up and knock on this door to talk to my partner and I need to really tell them something. What happens? Nervous system triggered, orphan part becomes active. I get sucked back in, pull away, protective mechanism also comes up. I cannot express my need because it's not safe for me to. I go into a survival reaction based on that root of that event that happened 20 years ago in that classroom. Or possibly I need to speak to a boss, something at work. Similar situation. I go knock on their door, bam, parts activated, parts triggered, survival mode turns on, and I get sucked back in and never have that conversation. So now I've got these beliefs, these narratives, these emotions, this dysregulated nervous system around all of this based on one initial reaction, which was based around shame. And if you take not just one of these instances, but now a couple dozen, growing up, maybe another year in a classroom or another event, which happened, like a lot of people that I work with, a lot of the trainings that I do, the certifications that I have, it has this compounded effect where all of a sudden your shame now becomes an identity and it starts to be created that you aren't good enough, that I am worthless. It's not safe. Now it's not just about that it's not safe to speak up. Now it's not safe to express joy. It's not safe to be sad. It's not safe to be angry. It's not safe to cry. And I just limit and limit and limit and limit my expression down to the point to where no wonder all I want to do is go isolate. I don't want to go outside. Everything is a threat to my safety. Does that make sense? Now, this is like a very extreme situation, but coming from a very common, not so like you might not think like that response could have happened. And this is also to say too, again, I want to say the power of repair, because being a parent myself, sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, like my kids are doomed because I just yelled at them and now, I don't want to coddle, but I don't want them to feel traumatized for the rest of their life. There's always a space for repair. And this is why it's so important to have the tools and the resources in order to now process said stuck emotions, process said, stuck events or compounded energies within our body. Our energy it's infinite, okay? And that is why if you believe in generational traumas being able to be, broken by one person, and it breaks future and past generational traumas. Energy is infinite. So going back to the story here, this part of us, inside of us, it's all the time, I'd rather withdraw. I'd rather isolate. It's kind of constantly pushing against, what we feel we need to do. It's like I need to engage with people at work. I need to, do XYZ to live in the world. It's like that conscious versus subconscious kind of inner battle. However, we create these protector parts and now we are shy or timid or have this slouch posture, for example. So when it comes to working with shame, I find it very useful to engage with this, physiology of like, what do you think of when you feel embarrassed or feel shameful? I kind of already stated it. Like, you kind of want to tuck away, you kind of want to, put your head down or go in the fetal position. You want to close up a little bit. So, a simple practice that you can do moving forward is to allow your body to express that feeling of what it wants to feel in those moments, to be able to help close that loop by fully allowing that part to take on. So, with shame, it's protective. Okay. It's a protective part. Let it go. Okay. Or let it run its course. So, I'm prefacing this is another video, but to create that safe container for yourself, put hands on heart, hands on belly, find some sort of practice that you can speak to yourself. It might just be like hands on heart, hand on belly, shutting your eyes, saying, I am safe, I am safe, I am safe. Maybe it's a five senses. You look at one thing you could see, one thing you could smell, one thing you could taste, one thing you could touch, one thing you could hear, to bring yourself, to ground yourself in that moment, to create that safe container. Because allowing the shame's protective route to run along its tracks, it will be able to process and close those loops, just like it was trying to do so in whatever moment that you had that created this rooted shame, but you weren't able to do it in that moment. Maybe you were shut down, maybe you were told to stop crying, maybe you were told to be quiet, or whatever that might be, and there wasn't that repair conversation afterwards for you to internalize, oh, okay, and let it process and move through you. So we have to allow our parts to fully express, allow our emotions to fully express, giving them the opportunity to complete, which also will also keep us safe. So for example, going back to me as that school kid, I didn't know what to do in that moment. Okay. I didn't know what was happening. Ideally, at the point in our lives where now I'm an adult, I'm more consciously aware. Maybe I'm doing this work. Maybe I'm feeling ashamed about something, or I'm consciously just like feeling these feelings of worthlessness or whatever that might be. I could tune in. So create that safe container, tune in to where am I feeling this in my body? Okay. And allowing myself to actually complete this action of I just want to hide away. I just want to curl up. And as you're doing this, you just keep attention on where you're feeling, most presently with your body. Where are you feeling this? So you can allow yourself to feel that tension, to feel that heaviness, to feel into that desire of being present with it. So you can allow yourself to or to excuse me, you could feel into that desire also of not wanting to be seen. And you can let yourself hide over a little bit, drop your head, drop your gaze, allow yourself to curl up. Maybe you want to go on the fetal position on the floor and curl up, head between your knees, go to a corner of a room, whatever that might be. And you know that you are safe. You're allowing yourself to simply be there. Okay? Allow yourself to feel as small as you want, because you're building that capacity, and you'll start to learn and build the skills to be able to sit with that and allow it to complete itself. And that feeling won't last forever. That's when it starts to transform and you're able to fully let it complete. You'll start to just feel like this dissipation in the places that you were feeling within your body. You're feeling maybe a little impulse. You notice something start to feel alive, wanting to rise up again. Is it safe? Maybe not. Nope, nope. I want to go back down. You start to give yourself that space to maybe go forward and forwards and backwards a little bit. You'll start to alchemize a sense of humility or authenticity as well with that shame. You start to feel that your authentic self is starting to be expressed again, because you've been so inauthentic for so long. You've been hiding your real self in your present life, sort of giving this fake self to the world. And as you start to metabolize the shame a little bit more and a little bit more, a little bit more, you rise into your authenticity. You feel the sense of opening, the sense of softness, the sense of strength, of peace. Going back to that scale of consciousness, you'll feel those levels of peace and joy and love naturally raising your baseline. Your sense of self becomes a little more solid. You'll be able to express your opinions and your desires, your expectations, and say yes with full yes and say no with full no. You'll be able to step into your uniqueness as a human being in this world. We are miracles. And you could step into your uniqueness and your authenticity and be perfectly okay with it because you know that there's only one of you. And this is where the permanent transformation begins. That permanent alchemy comes in because you're meeting yourself. You're opening and welcoming and honoring all parts of yourself and connecting that mind and body and learning how to process in the moment. Then in the moment, process these feelings, these emotions, to have that mind, body, spirit, soul connection, to be able to process the emotions, the feelings, the events within the moment, to allow them to fully move through you, and you could live that present life, raising your scale of consciousness naturally, because that is how we were innately born. We were innately brought into this world feeling those levels of love and peace and happiness and joy. So I hope that this training, now I wasn't expecting to talk this long, I hope that this training landed well with you. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, if anything, sat well, resonated with you, if you have any tensions popping up, reach out to me. Send me an email at hello@naturallympoweredliving.com. I would love to know how you're getting on with this. If you are a client of mine, send me a message and practice better. Let me know that you listened to this training, and I'm here for you. I am just so thankful to have been put on this path to really uncover emotions and how we work and just really help bridge that gap. So thank you so much and take care. Sending my love. If this episode stirred something within you, if you possibly found yourself nodding along, feeling seen or a little more understood, or maybe even felt a little resistance, I want you to know all is welcome here. Healing is not linear. And when it comes to emotions, especially like shame, it can feel overwhelming to untangle where it all began or why it is still holding so much weight. That's where root cause therapy can come in. These sessions, we go beneath the surface to meet those younger parts of you, to meet those hidden parts of you, those deep-rooted parts of you that are still holding pain, possibly shame or fear, and gently guiding those emotions towards release, towards healing and integration. We don't just talk about what happened. We connect to where it lives in your body and gently work with it to bring you back into alignment, to release that emotion for good. So if you're ready to explore this work more deeply, I'd love to hold that space for you. You can learn more or book a root cause therapy session at the link that I share in the show notes, or go to naturallympoweredliving.com/root-cause-therapy. And remember, you are not broken, you are not too much, and you are always enough. You're healing, and you make sense, and that is sacred work. So until next time, be gentle with yourself. And as always, simply be you. You have everything inside of you to learn your energy of alignment and be unapologetic in who you are. I'm sending my love and so much light.
Did you find this episode free or empowering? Please read my review. Tickle, boop.
Thank you for spending this sacred time with me on Naturally Empowered Living. If this episode brought you closer to stepping into your energy of alignment, I'd love for you to leave a written review and share how this show has supported your journey. Your feedback truly lights me up and helps others find the space of transformation. And sharing it with someone who might need it spreads the ripple of healing even further. Be sure to check the show notes for ways to connect with me and explore personalized healing sessions and mentorships to deepen your self-awakening journey. Thank you. I appreciate all you are and all you do.